they're uncomfortable because they think they know, but they don't know. They don't want to show that they don't know. So as a lawyer who works in that kind of environment, you have to really kind of take that education mantle on and work with them in a way that doesn't threaten them or their expertise.
All right. So welcome to the You Are Lawyer podcast. Juliet
Thank you.
Peters, how are you today?
I'm great, Kyla, and super excited to be here and talk to you today.
Yeah, me too. So we were just chatting offline a little bit about Ohio. I'm in Ohio now. You used to live in Ohio. Why did you move away besides the weather?
So I went to Ohio in my last career before I was a lawyer as a journalist, and I was working in Dayton for just shy of 2 years.
Yeah.
And then I got a job in Milwaukee, so I transferred from Dayton to Milwaukee. But I love Ohio. I think it's a great place.
Yeah, I do too. I'm very biased, but I absolutely love it. So journalism,
Yep.
what was that like? And especially as a foundation before you became a lawyer?
So I think the skill set that you use as a working journalist is actually very similar to what you do as a lawyer, right? So you're digesting lots of information, you're interviewing people, gathering data, right? And then you are putting it into a form that someone else can digest themselves. So that skill set of sort of gathering the information, writing the information, entering into sort of a form of negotiation, right? When you're interviewing people, it's super helpful as a background for a lawyer. And I am fortunate, I think, to have had that experience prior to going to law school, because I think it really made me a better law student, and it clearly makes me a better lawyer because I approach everything from kind of like a question framework, instead of a roadmap that I only stick to that roadmap. So I do spend a lot of time actually asking questions as part of my practice. Most lawyers do, obviously, in depositions, but it's a little bit different when you're establishing a relationship with a business client, right? I tend to ask a lot of questions and come from a place of curiosity as opposed to I have the information and I'm going to deliver to you and you're going to do what I say you're going to do, right?
Yeah. But I think that's a really good example, right? Because as lawyers, we're taught to not ask any questions that we don't know the answer to.
Right.
So to already know the answer, but still present it in a way where you're being welcoming and you're accepting feedback and being curious it's a skill. It's a gift.
Right. Yeah, it is. I started my career as a litigator, right? So, obviously I was trained the same way, never to ask a question you don't know the answer to, right? Especially in a deposition framework. But I think on the side of what I'm doing now, which is I help a lot of people buy and sell businesses, I also serve as kind of like a fractional outside counsel. Questions are the only way you're going to get to the information for what is important to this business, right? And how do we design the solutions we're going to design around what they need and where they're heading in their business. And even when you're litigating, right, you need to ask all of those questions to your own client because you don't want to get an unhappy surprise, right, when you're in the middle of a deposition.
Yeah.
So I think as lawyers, questions are really a critical tool that we can use to gather information. And it really helps to understand where the client is intending to go, right? And how that fits into their bigger business framework.
Yeah. So I'm trying to not jump too far ahead, but
go right ahead.
So how did you start selling or buying businesses or being into that practice?
So I worked in-house for a company, a very large franchise company, right? And so I was exposed to the sale of franchise within that context. Now, as the franchisor, you're often not directing that sale process. You're sort of like the middleman. You need to approve their sale, but you're not producing the paperwork. Or the franchisor I worked for did have a fair amount of distressed stores. So sometimes the company would take them over and then we needed to, sell them to somebody else, right? So that's really where I became exposed to buying and selling businesses. And then, as the years went on, and I became much more heavily focused on business, it just was kind of a natural evolution of what I was doing. Also, I tend to come from a framework of education when I'm working with a client, and except in the case where somebody is a serial entrepreneur and they're buying and selling a lot of businesses, right? Most people are going to have one business and they're only going to have one sale if they have any. And
Yeah.
so they don't know a lot of times what the process looks like. They're uncomfortable because they think they know, but they don't know. They don't want to show that they don't know. So, as a lawyer who works in that kind of environment, you have to really kind of take that education mantle on and work with them in a way that doesn't threaten them or their expertise, but delivers the information and makes the process easier for them. Because a lot of times people will tank their own business sale because they can't see themselves as something other than a business owner. So there's a lot of weird psychology involved in that kind of a practice. And I happen to be kind of, adept at that,
Yeah.
coming from a non-threatening place and assisting them in getting to the next step if they want to get there. Sometimes deals fall out and they should fall out, right? And that's a whole other podcast. Like, we could talk about what are the red flags. And in this day, and age, selling to private equity, which is, business owners think is the sort of the gold standard, is fraught with a lot of real difficult hurdles, particularly if you have built your business with a really great culture and then you're selling it to a company that likely does no care about your
Yeah.
culture, right? So I mean, I think there are issues that need to be kind of walked through and talked through, but that's kind of how I got there. Just
Yeah.
sort of an evolution of what I was already doing. Yeah.
Yeah, but I think it's really cool that it could be an evolution because you already had that background, right?
Yeah.
I'm sure someone was
Yeah.
like, "How are you going to make these things work?" And you're like, "I don't know, but let's do it." And then slowly it's like, "Wait, but I have this set of skills with franchise. I have this set of skills from education. I
Yeah.
have this set of skills for journalism. Oh, it does work."
Yeah. It's very true that, my road as a lawyer has been very circuitous, right? So I had a whole first career as something completely different. And then my second career, started as a litigator, went in house with a company, ran a very large division of a public law firm in Arizona, the Attorney General's office, did child and family protection, supervised 380 people. That was much more of a management job, less of a law job. And I didn't know the business area at all, right? I had never done child welfare. And that particular organization, they were in a kind of a meltdown where they had a bar complaint, basically very unusual, lodged against the office by a judge for filing some affidavits prior to having the information be verified in the affidavit. So that was really a cleanup on aisle 9, right? And when I and when I left that, when the AG was sort of moving on and termed out, right, meaning he couldn't be reelected, I knew I was going to do something different. And I decided, look, I got no clients coming out of a public law practice. You don't have any clients. So I was going to have to start from scratch wherever I started. So I kind of just designed what I thought I wanted. And initially, that was working with a partner, was not a good fit long term. And so then I started my own practice, which at the time I started it a number of years ago, I was doing things kind of in a unique way, meaning I'm kind of what I would describe as a solo plus. So I'm a solo, but I gather, team members depending on, the project. So when you're selling a business, a lot of times you might have tax ramifications, you could have employment issues. And so I was building what I would call teams in order to get the work accomplished, which, while more common now, was not as common when I started my business 10 years ago, right?
Yeah.
So, or that iteration of my business. And I'm getting ready to pivot again because, I probably have really about 10 more solid years left of working. I don't want to abandon law because I really enjoy working with people as they're selling their businesses, but I'm going to kind of turn away from the more general business practice and drive hard into more the sale end of it. And in addition to that, add coaching training to and a more sort of media platform into kind of go back to where I came from, my original roots, because I believe that I'm seeing women open businesses at twice the rate of men, and we have a lot of unique skill sets, leadership qualities, and oftentimes they're not taken seriously, or they're denigrated for what they are, right? And I really think that our future relies on having unique perspectives, and not kind of having the old patriarchal culture sort of, going full bore. So, and I have seen myself in my own accessing coaching as a business owner, that women do way better in communities, way better when they create and build a community. Everyone in that community rises. So that's kind of where I'm heading.
Yeah. I appreciate you sharing that you're coming up on another pivot, because what I've been realizing, and I've stopped fighting it, is that we're always going to be pivoting. We're always going to
Mm.
be transitioning because we are dynamic people and we have lots of interests. And I used to fight that a lot.
Yeah.
And now I'm leaning into it. And it's like, this is what I'm doing now. If something else seems interesting in a couple of weeks, then I'm doing that too. Or I have to assess, do I want to take time away from this for that? But like, I'm not going to get to a point where I'm like, this is it. Because I
You're
loved being in big law. I loved managing. I love being around lawyers all the time. I love talking to attorneys all the time. And it's not that I hated it, and that's why I left. It was just that I started the podcast and I was like, I really love this part
yeah.
now. I was like, and
Yeah,
I
and
like it
that's
more.
and that's the thing about evolution, and it particularly, I think, is a thing for women's evolution. And the reason I say that is because the studies really sort of demonstrate that women do really well in a number of different sort of career paths, right? I mean, we make really solid decisions, generally speaking. We're more calculated risk takers than crazy risk takers,
Yeah.
right? And we also aren't always driven by money, right? That can be a downfall, and we can talk about that in a minute. Because as women, we've got to kind of embrace our ability to make money, right? And we have to stop giving away our time for free. And as women business owners, we also have to understand, hey, I might need to pay some providers, right? This the whole idea of doing everything yourself is probably a bad idea, right?
Yes.
So I think there are unique challenges we as women have to confront. But also I think you hit the nail on the head. And I honestly tell my kids this all the time, which is, get on the road and just walk,
Yeah.
because you're going to come to a fork. You're going to take that path, might not be the right path, not a big deal, right? You're going to keep evolving. And the minute you stop evolving and stop learning and stop growing, that's the minute you say goodbye, right? Because as human beings, we're always going to be evolving until the day we die. And I don't know where we all, because I had the same idea you did, which is like, I'm going to a destination, right? No. I mean, that path,
Yeah.
that is the destination, right? The road is the destination. You're never going to get to a place and finish and go, woo, I've done it, right?
Yeah.
Because that's not how being a human being works.
Well, I want to celebrate you for the fact that you are speaking to other people about the fact that it's not a destination, it's a journey. Because I remember talking to my mom and I was like, Mom, did you do what you wanted to do when you were younger? Are you in your dream career? And she was like, I hadn't considered it. We weren't considering it. Yeah.
Yeah, different time. I mean, I remember reading this book back, and I think it was originally written, I don't even know when, in the 70s or the 80s, called What Color is My Parachute? It's a fascinating book even to read now, which was kind of like, but that was kind of the beginning of this idea that you could design, sort of your life, right? Because I think those of us, probably your mom's age, and maybe even a little younger than your mom, we were really focused on taking a path, right? Whatever you showed aptitude for, and then you work that path until you stopped working.
Yeah.
And nobody ever asked you, hey, is that the right fit for your skills? Do you feel like, I mean, that was just not part of the conversation, right? And that, I think, has been sort of the evolution of work, particularly for women. I mean, we were very, very pigeonholed into what we could and should do, right? There were always women professions, right? And if you strayed out of the women professions, like nursing, teaching,
Yeah.
anything that was caregiving, right? Then you had to fight a whole different series of challenges. And as a person of color, you fight a whole other series of challenges, even in addition to that, right?
Yeah.
So I think that this idea that we could really step back and think, hey, we can look at what we're good at, and we can build off of that, and also we can change. We don't need to go to law school and be a lawyer for the entire career, right? And law school, more than probably any other education, really gives you the ability to think and write in a way that is easily translatable to other careers. But I think, in addition to all of the ideas that we face as women working, and lawyers have been doing sort of the same set of things forever, right? And it's a calling a lot of times, not necessarily, a profession. But because of that, I have heard like a lot of lawyers who are afraid to leave
Mm-hmm.
because they say, well, what else can I do? And even me, when I'm starting to kind of transition a little bit, I'm definitely fearing what happens when I arrive somewhere and I'm showing myself without the ESQ at the back of it, right?
Yeah.
Meaning you get an instant kind of credibility from being a lawyer and going to law school, and that loss of credibility when you're stepping into something new is pretty darn scary. You have to
Yes.
have a good sense of self and understand, and I'm talking out loud to myself here, understand what you have, is valuable, whether or not you're appearing in the world as a lawyer or not.
Okay, so have you listened to every episode? Because you're saying everything I say every episode.
I haven't listened to every episode, but I have listened to a few. So,
This
but that's
show was created because I feel like you cannot take off your legal education. Even when we bought
very
this house, I was like, "Can I read the mortgage?" And they were like, "Seriously?" And I was like, "I won't ask questions about everything, but yes, I do want to read it."
right.
And so you can't turn that off. My
Yeah.
daughter is 4; she negotiates with us.
Yeah.
Well, but if I can do one more book,
Right.
and I'm like, I probably taught you that. I can't be mad. We don't turn it off. It's with us everywhere.
Right. So, I mean, I think the value in that is that um, the core skills of lawyering really help in any kind of a business that you're in, right? I think the downside of not being able to take off your legal education is you can't take it off in your own head. And so that really becomes a little bit, or it can to some people, become a prison, right? Because they can't see themselves as anything other than that.
Yeah.
And I think it's about kind of stripping back the expectation there and going for, well, fundamentally, what is the skill set that I have that I can use elsewhere? Life's too short to be unhappy doing what you're doing. And it always struck me as odd when I talk to, and I have to say that I hear this more from men than I do women, because women are like, hey, if I'm not liking what I'm doing, I'm checking out, right? But men, I think, really struggle sometimes. And I hear this from male lawyers, like, what else would I do? It's a box. They built
Yeah.
their own prison, right? And they just can't see themselves breaking out of it in any measurable way. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that goes back to just figuring out what it means to be creative and to enjoy your life, because you can enjoy your profession and you can enjoy your task, and that in all of those tasks and profession could have created a comfortable life, but that still doesn't mean that you are enjoying all of it. You know what I mean? And like, it's hard. Lawyers have to give ourselves permission to say we're allowed to enjoy life, that we are allowed to enjoy
Yes.
things outside of our
True.
task and our work, because that's hard. I mean, we literally put sweat and tears. I
Yep.
can't say blood, sweat, and tears, but okay, money, sweat, and tears
Yeah.
into becoming lawyers. And so
Right.
it is hard to turn off. There's a literal investment. So it is
Yep.
hard. So it is hard to run a business and start a business. Most
Yes.
businesses still, even in 2025, it's hard for them to survive after 6 months, after a year. And then you have a law firm and you want to sell it?
Yeah.
What is that like?
Each type of business has its own unique framework, right? Law firms are tricky to sell. And I hear, in some of the more recent coaching programs, you want to sell your law firm, here's how you do it, right? You scale it, you remove yourself from it. If you remove yourself from it, you have a saleable asset, which is the thought process around any business, right? It's the difference between a lifestyle business, right? And an enterprise business. An enterprise business is one that builds value and is not dependent on the owner, right? But even in law, I'm not sure that you ever really get to the enterprise business side of the equation, because the thing that makes it tricky is clients have a choice, right? The choice rests in the hands of the clients. So valuing that is super tricky, right? Because let's say you have 100 clients, right? You can't guarantee that the 100 clients that you've built with this enterprise level business are going with
Yeah.
the sale, right? Because the choice remains with the client. So I think that when I see sort of sales happen, they're not in the traditional framework that you would see, say an accounting practice sold. I think that what is best is to try to sell off the revenue stream, right? And monetize that from a longer distance. Meaning, yes, when you have hard assets like furniture, fixtures, equipment, and that stuff, yes, that's saleable, right? But the revenue stream, you have to treat a little bit differently. Meaning, let's say you have $100,000 net profit in your business every year. You're not multiplying that times a 3 multiple like you would in another business, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't make a ton of sense. That's not to say that it can't happen. I'm just saying I think we do lawyers a disservice when we kind of wrap them into that framework, because that's not usually how it's going to go down. You're going to make money on the revenue that's generated by the client base going into the new business. So, and also I want to say for younger lawyers, it's a great way to grow your practice, right? Is to find a retiring lawyer and monetize, grow your firm through accessing those clients. And if you have to pay like a trailing revenue to that lawyer, that's going to be great for you because you're buying clients.
Yeah.
And if the clients don't come, well, then it's not based on the revenue of the old business, but based on the maximizing that client base for the new business.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I hope the audience is like, oh, wow, I never even thought about that.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, a law firm is subjective, literally, because the clients get to choose, but also
Right.
lawyers are very different and they manage in very different ways.
Right.
So I could see how even though you may bill your time and this is how much I put in, this is the value in numbers, it's different when it comes to the actual relationships. So
Yeah, because you can't guarantee that those are transferring. And so the
mhm.
whole basis that you would typically use in any business sale is wonky when it comes to a law firm.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But that's why lawyers are so fun. And whenever we say yes or no, we say it depends. Because it depends.
exactly. The famous lawyer answer. And now I just preface and say lawyer answer coming. It depends.
It depends.
So because it does depend on a
Yeah,
bunch of factors.
it
So,
does.
yeah. So, we'll see what happens with AI. That's the biggest unknown to how all of us are practicing going forward.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's not going to replace lawyers. I really don't think that's what's going to happen, but it is going to drive the amount of money you can charge for documents way down.
Yeah.
That's why if you're, a younger lawyer or up and coming, you really want to focus your skills on things that can't, at least not yet, be done by AI, right? Until they become sentient beings. And, it could happen.
Yeah. And
I mean, I guess
speaking of,
that's one thing I've learned in the last year is, we really don't know how AI could evolve, right?
yeah. Plus, I feel like everything, and especially technology, is moving so fast in terms of
So
like the way that
fast.
it's advancing and like speeding up. But that's a great segue, Juliet, because I ask every guest, what would you say to young lawyers, 5 years practicing or less, or law students about what they can do with their law degrees?
So I would say think about the skills that you have and what areas you can apply those skills in. If you come out and find that the job market is really difficult, then think instead of being defeated by the fact that the job market is really difficult, repackage that because you're going to need that when you start moving into other industries. If you decide that, you're not able to really practice as a lawyer. And if you want to practice as a lawyer, find mentors immediately. If you are fortunate enough to be in a firm, you will have mentors. But the vast majority of people coming out of law school and young lawyers are not going to be in the kinds of firms, the Amjur 200s, where training is still happening, right? So you're going to have to self train and you need to find really good practitioners. Look for ex big firm lawyers in your town. Set up meetings, just coffee meetings. And I can bet you that any lawyer that you ask to assist you as a mentor will do so because lawyers are very good about that if asked, right? But realize that they're not going to drive the relationship. You have to take every CLE you can find on the topics you're interested in and learn, learn, learn. Always be learning about everything. I mean, honestly, I think that's the key. I think one of the things that we don't do enough of is we don't teach people that you have to continue to learn, not just as lawyers, but as people, right?
Mm-hmm.
You have to just always be accessing all the resources out there to learn, right? The other thing is, and I don't think enough people think about this, but public law, even though it doesn't pay well, is a great way to get your feet wet and training, 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 because the public law practices do still offer training. And if you spend, let's say you do 2 years as with the attorney general's office or in a county prosecutorial or defense side, even if you don't like it, criminal law, for example, you will gain such valuable insight and skills that will be transferable to where you want to go. There is a certain amount of dues paying still.
Yeah. I definitely used to see that as being a negative, all of the dues paying. But when we come out of law school, we have book knowledge and we don't have the experience knowledge. And I think it's more, you can't really hit the ground running because you have to learn the experience knowledge. You have to learn how to play the game. You have to learn what's happening in this office, not how it happened in case law forever ago. How is it happening here? And that part is the learning curve is steep, but you can do it. You can handle it.
Absolutely, people can handle it. They've been doing it for a long time, but you do have to have the sense that you arrive really as a newborn in a lot of ways, because the law school education, the bar preparation, the bar itself none of that teaches you how to actually do lawyer things, right? I'm not a big fan of going right through from college to law school because I think you need a couple of years to be working. It's very hard to be a new worker and a new lawyer at the same time. You need to know kind of what the expectation is, just even in the work world, before you sort of are really in charge of matters that matter. They matter to people, right? Even if it's money, money matters to people. And God forbid if you're working in a thing where you've got a child's, future in your hands, or somebody's going to jail, those are weighty, right? And so it's really hard to start that if you don't have any real world experience.
Yeah. Absolutely, absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Juliet. I truly appreciate this conversation, and I know the audience is going to absolutely love it. Typically, most people say you can do everything with a law degree, and I love that you were like, no, you can do these three things. Make sure you do these three things. And I think that's so on point with you and everything you told us about how you're a coach and a teacher, and you come
Yeah.
from all that background.
Yep.
So I
Yep.
appreciate it. Thank you.
Absolutely. And if anybody, has any questions or needs anything, they can always reach out to me. My website is www.frameworklegal.com. And there's a form there you can fill out, and, I respond to any inquiries that I get there. So yeah. Feel free to hit me up. So awesome.
Absolutely. All right. Well, thank you so much, Juliet. You have a great rest of the day.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Thanks for having me, Kyla.